There is a Buddhist saying, forgiveness does not excuse their behaviour. Forgiveness prevents their behaviour from destroying your heart. Hatred does not cease hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. This morning, talking about forgiveness, to forgive. It can be complex and it can be very, very hard. Can you forgive the person who physically attacked you, or the family member who abused you, the friend that dumped you? There are so many instances of forgiveness and the need for it. But is it possible to forgive when you've been so very devastated emotionally? And should you always forgive? Can you forgive but not forget? Is that still forgiveness? So let's talk about forgiveness with your regular life coaches, Justin Dwyer and Maria Vandergeest, Present Way Coaching. Can you forgive someone who has physically attacked you, Justin?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and I think we need to understand that forgiveness is not for the other person. The way we see it is that forgiveness is not for the other person. So you've already mentioned we're not condoning the behaviour. We're not saying that that was acceptable. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is actually saying that it happened, and then we need to go through the process of grief that it happened and then empower ourselves to move forward. So, sorry, I forgot your question already.
That's okay. Well, you've mentioned something very, very interesting there, and I'll go to you, Maria, is the cycle of grief. And I think there's 5 stages of grief. Do you have to go through that cycle for forgiveness? Is it the same thing?
It really depends. It depends on what's happened. It depends on how it's impacted you, and it depends on, your own person and what you believe about yourself and about your world. So but grief is a very big part of forgiveness. So the first step when we're thinking, I want to move through this, and I don't want this thing that's happened to me to define me. I don't want it to be. I don't want it to affect my life. I don't want to have the tension and the stress and the worry and the anxiety and the bitterness and the resentment. I don't want to carry that anymore. I don't want what happened to me to be something I live into my future. So that's when we say, okay, I want to forgive and let go. So the first step is really acknowledging what happened deeply. So deeply acknowledging I was badly hurt. I was physically assaulted. No part of me deserved that. Nothing I did deserved that. So we have to really acknowledge deeply what happened. And then there's the grieving process, because you're sad, you're hurt. There's so much. So some people will need to go through the stages of grief, and it can take time. Sometimes we need to pick it up for a while and feel it and then put it down again. And then we might need to pick it up and feel it again and talk to people and whatever you need for that grieving process to come to a point when then you can say, I'm ready to let it go. I'm ready to choose my peace over justice. I'm ready to choose my life, the way I want to live, who I am, how I want to change through this, and I'm ready to actually release that, and I'm not going to let it define me. Yes, it happened to me. I won't forget it. And you can't anyway. We can't forget, particularly for really, abuse and assault. Those things are written into our nervous systems. But we can choose to let it go and choose that for ourselves. And when we do that, an amazing thing happens, and compassion for ourselves is born. We have more compassion for who we are, and then we can actually have a great deal of compassion even for our abusers sometimes, certainly for other people that have experienced something similar to us.
I'm exhausted by that. There's a lot there. I want to talk about peace over justice. Justin, that sounds like something that is opposite, that they are two fundamental opposites. Mm-hmm. They are clashing.
Yeah.
Peace over justice, forgiveness.
Yeah, sometimes we hold on to, we've been hurt for sure, and we need to acknowledge that, and we hold on to that, and we have this righteous anger. We want somebody else to feel what we feel. We want the perpetrator, the person, whatever's happened to us, we want them to understand our pain. And that's why we hold on. But what if the person who hurt you has passed away? What if you're never going to get that resolved? You're never going to have that other person understand what's happened to you. And this is where we have to choose. Do we want justice in the sense that we have it, which is I want them to understand, I want them to feel it, I want them to hurt, I want them to feel what I feel, or do you want peace in your heart? And
is that the root? Is that the root of everybody? Justice, whether it's, and I don't want to simplify it too much, but, you know, I'm thinking about domestic violence, to be honest with you, because that is so deeply traumatic on many, many levels. But also your best friends just decided, I actually don't want you in my life anymore. You know, you haven't done anything, you haven't said anything. I just don't want you in my life anymore. Just suck it up. You know what I mean? So
I think we feel
justice.
Well, as human beings, we have emotions, so we feel hurt, and that kind of justice is protecting ourselves from deeply feeling that pain. We don't want to feel rejected, disowned, abandoned. And again, like Maria says, whatever happens to us, it's not because of who we are. It doesn't have to define who we are. But we need to deeply feel that first before we can move through that. But before we can do that, the anger blocks us, the sadness blocks us. Again, a lot of the stuff we deal with and talk about comes back to emotional intelligence, is understanding what's happening emotionally within our body. We don't want to feel any discomfort because it hurts.
Absolutely.
It's deeply hurting.
Absolutely.
So.
I think at the heart of it is pain. Like this, it caused pain. And that's why it's hard to forgive, because we want to do something with our pain.
But what about them? Look, I'm thinking maybe the childcare situation at the moment. There is a person who has been charged with 70 sexual assault offences against teeny-weeny, vulnerable, small humans.
Yes. It's horrific.
Should you always forgive?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well, again, you're not condoning that behaviour. You're not saying that that person... I mean, you could say that person is... You know, you could have your judgments about them, whatever, but you're not actually condoning the behaviour. Forgiveness is not saying, they, shouldn't have done that or whatever. It's actually just acknowledging that it happened. Do you want to ruin the rest of your life by hanging on to that?
And that's where forgiveness comes in, even though I don't know that person.
Yeah.
But there are certainly things in the news cycle every day where I just feel this enormous sense of anger and resentment and hate to some extent. Yeah. And so forgiveness seems sort of a step too far.
And I think what you're referring to, if I might, is that sometimes forgiveness isn't possible at the time. It takes time to get to a place where you might want to forgive. And I think it's deeply personal.
But should we always forgive? Should we?
Oh, I think that's a really deeply personal decision again, because you can choose. You get the choice. You can choose whether you're going to or not, and you can choose how you're going to play it out in your life. And I wouldn't judge anyone for not forgiving that particular person for harming their baby, for example. However, there's a choice to make. There's a choice to say, how am I going to let this impact my life? How am I going? So, and forgiveness is a path where we're going to say this happened in my life and acknowledge it. And I'm going to choose to forgive because I want it to have the least impact on my life.
But are you weak? Are you a weak person?
Yeah, I love that. That's so great, because it feels weak, doesn't it? And it feels like we're letting them off the hook, and it feels like we're just condoning or allowing this dreadful behaviour. Feels like we're just saying, whatever, you just go to jail and live your life out in a happy little jail with all the fancy frip-diddlies we give you in there, and look what I'm dealing with. So it feels weak, but actually it's incredibly strong, because you have to come back to yourself and you have to say, well, I'm living with I'm defining my life and I'm not letting that define me. So it's an incredibly strong, actually it's a very hard path, as we've just sort of, as you unravel it. It's a very hard path to forgive and let go of pain and not let it define you.
You're on ABC Local Radio right across the Northern Territory, and with you this morning, Justin Dwyer and Maria van der Geest. They are Present Way Coaching and talking about forgiveness, when you should forgive, should you forgive, how do you forgive, and what happens after you've forgiven. We've talked about justice and injustice, but what about accountability? Is that the same? Is accountability, Justin, the same as justice?
I think when it comes to repair, So when there's been an incident, that you need to forgive, something's happened and you've been hurt, the next stage is to work out, do I want to repair with this person? Let's just say there's been a domestic issue and you go through it, you talk about it, you bring it to the light and you both, come to a point where you're able to see it for what it is. Now you have to decide, do we want to repair and go forward, or do we want to forgive in the sense that, let's just say a woman's been abused in the home, because that's stereotypical. She decides, okay, I'm going to forgive this man, not his actions, not what he's done, not any of that, but I'm releasing myself from the burden emotionally that happened. It's taught me some things about myself. I'm going to move on with boundaries now. I've learnt boundaries. I've learnt that I've neglected myself, that I didn't stand up for myself, whatever it was. So in that case, you can't really hold someone else accountable. We can only hold ourselves accountable. So that woman, in that sense, has to hold herself accountable, that maybe she, out of fear, she missed some red flags, whatever it is, but only she can look at it and say, okay, well, I need to be accountable for what I brought to it, what I missed. And again, you have to forgive yourself again that you missed some red flags, whatever, but that's not weakness. It's just, it is what it is. The empowered position is, how do I move forward from this? How do I choose to go forward? Then if we're looking at a relationship where maybe that guy's, done some things violently to her, and then you move forward together, yes, there needs to be accountability on both parts, actually, that, okay, I missed these things, and the woman, I didn't talk up, I didn't say these things when I should have. And the guy also has his stuff to deal with, that he has to take accountability for his stuff. So in that sense, that's maybe the justice in the relationship, that situation both serves you to see something deeper that you can grow from and move forward from. But that's
it's tough.
That's a heck of a challenge.
It's a challenge, absolutely.
That really is forgiveness plus reconciliation. So that's what that process is, that last process is, reconciling. And that's where the only way to reconcile is when two partners, or the two people involved, or maybe more than that, actually take full responsibility for their part in the incident or whatever's occurred, and they're actually willing to change their behaviours and continually, discuss it and grieve and process it together. So that accountability really happens through a process of reconciliation, and the only way it can happen is with accountability.
Obviously, you're not here to provide personal advice to people, but I have got a text that I'm going to share with you, and maybe we can just talk about it on a broader term rather than specifically to this person. And they say, if someone has maliciously hurt me or my family, I do not forgive and I do not forget. They are wiped from my life and my consciousness for the rest of my days. They become invisible to me. I never, ever give anyone a second chance to hurt me or my family ever again. So very strident and very strong words there, some of which is in capital letters. On a broader scale, what do you say to that?
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that position. It's just that's the boundaries that this person has set based on the experience this person has had in their life, and they have set those boundaries, and they've said they are my boundaries, and that's the standard that I will live by.
All right, well, I need to counter that by saying letting go of negative emotions, okay, because that's all negative.
Yep.
That's my vibe. So in general, do you just hold on to that negative emotion, you wipe that person, but what are the benefits of letting go of emotion, of negative emotions?
Great.
That would be my caveat too, is that's fine to set whatever boundary you like, but if that's locked your heart up, then you've imprisoned your own heart in that process. So again, that's a personal choice. If you feel like over time, and you'll know over time, nobody can tell you how you're feeling, but you'll know intuitively that thing, that incident, that person, you haven't let it go. You may have put a wall around it, but you've actually trapped that energy around your heart.
And is it bad not to let it go?
It is actually, because again, Maria alluded before to our nervous system, our body records everything. So if we're holding on to anger, frustration, sadness, bitterness, it's locked within our body, and our body will express that at some point.
And often it's
whether
through
that's a
disease,
physical,
and ailments,
cancer, whatever. So that our body...
The body holds the score.
The body keeps the score.
Absolutely, it really does. And it will turn up later in life oftentimes. And it's just stress and tension and fatigue, even just in short term. And, these emotional, these negative emotions that get stored and trapped in our bodies and in our nervous systems, and they will play out. We might pretend or not want to see them, but they do.
If we're unconscious of it, so if we store things subconsciously within our body, it comes out sideways. You know the person who's angry, that's whatever. A lot of people have all these different behaviours. They're not conscious of them, but they come out sideways because they're bottled up.
That's so interesting. It makes me, just as an aside, when I go running, and sometimes I'm running for 2 hours at a time, and if I'm having negative thoughts, and I mean, you're in your own head for that amount of time. If I'm having negative thoughts, I run slower and I feel heavier. Mm-hmm. But if I'm having light thoughts or I'm thinking about new ideas and possibilities, I run faster?
Yeah.
Is this a similar thing, is it?
It is, absolutely.
It is.
Isn't that? I'd never thought about that.
Well, your heart is the gateway to your energy, basically. If you think of your heart as a valve for your energy, if your heart's closed and locked down, there's no energy coming through. And that's if it's suppressed with negative thoughts, negative emotions. That's why you have no energy. We think our energy comes from our food, but it's much deeper than that.
That's why I never play songs about my dog dying, my ute breaking down, and my wife leaving me.
No.
Depressing songs while you're running. Not a
You're
good
not going to get your personal best.
No PBs for Lorella. ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory. It's such an intriguing conversation and one to grapple with. Forgiveness, it is certainly an individual choice, but Justin Dwyer and Maria van der Geest, Present Way Coaching, just stepping through. What does forgiveness look like? What is the act of forgiveness? Turns out, as I've just learnt, it's actually got nothing to do with the person who has in some way, in your perception, wronged you. It's actually 100% about yourself.
You got it.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to lie down now. Cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing we'd like to leave with, I guess, and that is you're not weak for being hurt. You're not weak for being upset or being slighted against in this lifetime, but your power lies in your ability to free your own heart, to emotionally liberate yourself, and that does take courage and it takes real strength. That's where real strength comes from.
I imagine it feels good too. It feels energising and it feels freeing, like letting a bunch of butterflies out of your chest, and you feel a bit lighter and you can get on with it.
Yeah, and you've grown. You've grown in experience, and you might have set more boundaries for yourself or for in your life, and you've got more experience and hopefully a bit more compassion for all of us and the mistakes we make and how we hurt others and ourselves.